Jace from the Comic Source here with a special episode covering the huge announcement yesterday by Valiant Comics. 5 new series coming in 2015, and I've got all the details for you right here, so keep watching. Okay, so the big bombshell was dropped by Valiant Comics yesterday. They announced the creative teams and the concepts for 5 new titles starting in January 2015 and rolling out through April of next year. So I think the best way to give you guys the rundown on these new series that are starting is by reading the solicitation for the first issue. Now, it's not one of the 5 titles announced for 2015. It actually is going to start in December 2014, and that title is The Valiant. That's written by Jeff Lemire and Matt Kindt, and the art's by Paulo Rivera. And here's the solicitation for the first issue of the Valiant series. A battle 10 millennia in the making. The Eternal Warrior has protected the Earth for more than 10,000 years. A master of countless weapons and long-forgotten martial arts, he's guided by the Geomancers, those who speak for the Earth. During his long watch, the Eternal Warrior has failed 3 times. Each time the Geomancer was killed, and a new dark age for humanity began. Each time he was unable to stop the immortal enemy, a monstrous force of nature, a civilization killer, a horror that appears differently each time it arrives, and whose seemingly only purpose is to bring disorder and darkness to the world. Now the time has come for the immortal enemy to return once more, but this time the Eternal Warrior will be ready. This time he has a force greater than any single warrior. This time he has the Valiant. So it sounds pretty interesting. It sounds like Matt Kindt and Jeff Lemire are going to be bringing back the immortal enemy, who we've seen previously in a Valiant comic in an Archer and Armstrong arc. What I found very interesting was that Bloodshot is also going to be part of the series. Now, Jeff Lemire said in an interview that he felt like Bloodshot and the current Geomancer Kay McHenry are very opposite. Bloodshot is very much based in science, whereas Kay McHenry is very much based in nature, being that she's the speaker for the Earth. So those two should have a very interesting dichotomy and very interesting interaction. There's also a good chance we're going to see a lot of guest stars. A lot of other heroes from the Valiant universe are going to be appearing in these 4 issues. Archer and Armstrong are scheduled to be in the first issue, and we'll probably see Ivar, the Time Walker, as well, another one of the Eternal Warrior's brothers. So we're certainly looking forward to that series, and I feel it's going to kind of kick off this Valiant Next initiative that Valiant Comics announced yesterday with these 5 new titles. The first of those 5 new titles is Ivar Time Walker. That's going to be written by Fred Van Lente, and the art is by Clayton Henry. So we're seeing the original creative team for Archer and Armstrong back together, and that was certainly a great title, won some awards, so we look forward to those 2 working together again. The solicitation for Time Walker #1 reads, from the award-winning team that brought you Archer and Armstrong, New York Times best-selling creators Fred Van Lente and Clayton Henry present a centuries-spanning race against the clock. At this very moment in Geneva, Switzerland, history is being made. 1,000 meters underground, inside the Large Hadron Collider, researcher Neela Sethi is about to discover time travel and jeopardize her life in the process. But she doesn't know that yet. 10 minutes from now, every deadbeat chrononaut, wannabe conqueror, and misguided protector of the time stream will be banging down her door. Good thing that the legendary Ivar Time Walker got there first, right? Now it's down to history's most jaded, most tempestuous time traveler to stop the worst of everything that is, was, and will be before time runs out. So we're seeing the return of Ivar Time Walker. He had his own title the first go-round with Valiant in the 90s. And in fact, Fred Van Lente said that of all the original Valiant characters, Time Walker was his favorite. It makes a lot of sense. Fred Van Lente is a big fan of historical fiction, and he's a big fan of time travel stories. So he was asked in an exclusive interview with Comics Alliance, I'll put the link for the article down here on the bottom, if this series was meant to kind of fill in the backstory of the Valiant universe. And Fred said through the natural progression of the story, a lot of the history of the Valiant universe may come out just because it has such a tight continuity, but that's not necessarily the purpose of this series. We should see some familiar enemies make their appearance, maybe some enemies that were in the 90s series of the comic. And what's going to be most fun is seeing all the time periods that Ivar visits. In fact, the second issue is titled Let's Kill Hitler, so some World War II action is probably going to be contained in that book. The next title that Valiant announced is Divinity. This is a 4-issue miniseries. It's written by Matt Kindt, and the art is by Trevor Hairsine. And here's the solicitation for that first issue. At the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union, determined to win the space race at any cost, greenlit a dangerously advanced mission. They sent a man farther into the cosmos than anyone has gone before or since. Lost in the stars, he encountered something unknown, something that changed him. Long thought lost and erased from the history books, he has suddenly returned, crash landing in the Australian outback. The few that have been able to reach him believe him to be a deity, one who turned the scorched desert into a lush oasis. They say he can bend matter, space, and even time to his will. Earth is about to meet a new god, and he's a communist. How long can it be before the first confrontation between mankind and divinity begins? From New York Times best-selling writer Matt Kindt and blockbuster artist Trevor Hairsine comes a shocking new vision of 21st century science fiction in an all-new prestige format limited series. So it's pretty interesting to see what Valiant is doing here. With the apparent power of this divinity character, he almost reminds me of Solar, the ability to manipulate matter, space, and time. We have a few details that Matt Kindt provided in an exclusive interview with USA Today. Again, I'll put the link down here on the bottom. We know that he was a cosmonaut. We know that he was black, which is extremely interesting. Apparently, the Soviet Union was not only interested in beating the United States in the space race, but also in the civil rights movement. We know that each issue is going to be splintered. And apparently what's meant by that is we're going to not just see the progression of divinity as a character now, but also his progression, how he became a cosmonaut, basically how he's going to progress from being this human to becoming something much more. And Matt Kindt, when asked how it is to write this divinity story, he mentioned that sometimes it's extremely difficult to write a story for a character that is so omnipotent, has so much power. And so what he's focusing on is not what the character of divinity might do, but why he does it. So the writing with an emphasis on characterization that Matt Kindt's kind of known for, we can definitely expect more of that with a focus on what exactly it is that makes divinity do the things that he does. Apparently he is an individual who's very focused on the mistakes he's made in the past, and so I'm sure we'll see that play out throughout these 4 issues. The next series is Imperium, and that's sort of a continuation of the Harbinger title that led into Harbinger Omegas and now Imperium. So it's continued to be written by the writer of Harbinger and Harbinger Omegas, Joshua Dysart, and the art is going to be handled by Doug Braithwaite. The solicitation for Imperium reads as follows. A daring new superhero saga from the New York Times best-selling creator Joshua Dysart, writer of the Harvey Award-nominated series Harbinger, and superstar artist Doug Braithwaite. Toyo Harada is the most dangerous human being on the planet, imbued with incredible powers of the mind. He has spent his life guiding humanity from the shadows, but today he is a wanted man. His powers are public knowledge. His allies have turned to enemies, and he is hunted by every government on the planet. Instead of surrendering, Harada has one last unthinkable gambit to play. To achieve more, faster, and with less, he will build a coalition of the powerful, the unscrupulous, and the insane. No longer content to demand a better future, he will recruit a violent legion from the darker corners of the earth to fight for it. The battle for utopia begins now. Toyo Harada has certainly been one of the major players in the new universe that Valiant has created since it restarted, and Joshua Dysart has done an extremely good job of making this a very complex character. He's not a straight black and white villain. He definitely operates in the gray area. In fact, when asked about this new series in an article on comicbook.com, Josh stated that he feels that Harada is a man with good intentions, but a man whose good intentions are trapped inside the largest ego the world has ever known. And that's definitely one of his weaknesses. Probably the other weakness that he has, as Josh also mentions in the article, is his inability to abdicate any sort of power, his inability to share. He feels that only he knows what's right, and apparently only he is going to be able to achieve those goals. So this story spins right out of Harbinger Omegas, and Harada has been pushed to the absolute limit. He's got nowhere left to run, and this is his last chance to see his plans and his hopes for the Earth come to fruition. So he's willing to create an all-out battle for utopia. And everything you need to know about the story, according to Joshua Dysart, is found in that very profound contradictory statement. The next series, which will be starting in March, is Ninjak. This is probably the series that has me the most excited. It's also written by Matt Kindt, and the art is by Clayman. And here's the solicitation. Then, meet the inexperienced MI6 recruit Colin King on his first mission in the field as he learns the basics of spycraft and counterintelligence and develops a volatile relationship with his first handler. Now, Colin King is Ninjak, the world's foremost intelligence operative, weapons expert, and master assassin, and he's hunting the Shadow Seven, a secret cabal of shinobi masters with mysterious ties to his training and tragic past. For the first time, Ninjak's past and future collide in the pages of an all-new, ongoing series from New York Times best-selling writer Matt Kindt and superstar artist Clayman. So again, this is another character that had a series back in the first go-round of Valiant in the 90s, and he's back in a solo title of his own. Ninjak's always been one of my favorite Valiant characters. I'm very, very excited about this book. Matt Kindt, with his creator-owned property at Dark Horse Mind Management, has shown that he loves a good spy story. It's one of his favorite things to write, and this is a real passion project for him. In an exclusive interview, he shared a little bit about what we can expect in Ninjak. One of the really cool things about the series is each issue is going to be 30 pages. You're going to have the regular 22-page story, and then there's going to be a backup feature of 8 pages, also written by Matt Kindt, but with an unannounced artist. So perhaps it'll be a rotating artist. Perhaps Valiant will use it as sort of a tryout for new artists they want to bring on. Maybe Matt Kindt himself will do the art for some of those backup stories. We're just not sure yet. It's kind of a wait-and-see thing. What I can tell you is that Matt Kindt for sure will be doing a special feature on the inside of the front cover of each issue where he kind of focuses on a gadget or some technology that Ninjak is going to use in that issue, and he'll be providing the art and kind of the design, and we'll get a little insight into some of the tech that Ninjak uses. Kindt also mentioned that we can expect these stories to take place in 3 time periods. The first being we'll see Ninjak as a child, see some of the things that kind of shaped him into the man he is. We'll also see the time period of Colin King as an adult before he actually became Ninjak, and then we'll see the present day, as the solicitation mentioned, with Ninjak going up against this shadowy cabal of shinobi masters. As far as one of the things that has Kindt most excited about writing this story is that he gets to focus on one voice. He gets to focus on one character. When he writes Unity, it's a team book. He kind of has to juggle and make sure that each character gets their own time in the spotlight. And with Rai, he feels that's more of an ensemble piece, whereas this just focuses on the one character. He gets to focus on Ninjak, really try to find the character's voice, get inside what makes him tick. And so with Ninjak being one of my favorite characters, I'm definitely looking forward to this. Not to mention these beautiful pages by Clayman. This could be the best art I've seen in a Valiant book so far, and the only bad thing I can say about this series is it doesn't start until March. I cannot wait for this series, and I'm definitely going to have to try to track Clayman down at a convention and get some original art from him in my sketchbook. The last title, but certainly not least, is Bloodshot Reborn. That's going to be written by Jeff Lemire, and the art is by Miko Suyan. And here's the solicitation for that title. From New York Times best-selling writer Jeff Lemire and red-hot rising star Miko Suyan, Valiant delivers an all-new ongoing series for Valiant's most unrelenting hero. Bloodshot's nanites made him a nearly unstoppable killing machine. His enhanced strength, speed, endurance, and healing made him the perfect weapon, and he served his masters at Project Rising Spirit, a private contractor trafficking in violence, very well. Now Bloodshot is a shadow of his former self. He lives in self-imposed exile, reeling from the consequences of his past life and the recent events that nearly drove him mad. But when a rash of shootings by gunmen who appear to look just like Bloodshot begin, his guilt will send him on a mission to stop the killers, even if it means diving headlong into the violence that nearly destroyed him. So what's interesting about this book is that Lemire knew he was writing it before he even knew about the Valiant. He said in an exclusive interview on Comic Book Resources that knowing that he was going to write the story and knowing where he wanted to start allowed him to kind of steer the plot of the Valiant to where Bloodshot would end up where he wanted this series to start. Said he was very careful not to use the Valiant as just a bridge to kind of go from the end of Bloodshot to this Bloodshot Reborn, but rather have it be a story all unto its own. But it just so happens that some of the events in the Valiant lead perfectly to a place where Bloodshot is left in a place we've apparently never seen him before, and that's where the series will start. Now, the solicitation doesn't make any mention of Kay McHenry, but like I said before, in the Valiant, we're definitely going to see some interesting interaction between the kind of opposite nature of Bloodshot and Kay McHenry. And as you can see in these few preview pages that we've seen, Kay McHenry shows up in Bloodshot Reborn. So I have a feeling that that interesting dynamic could continue. Maybe it'll even be sort of a team book to start. Certainly interesting. I love Kay McHenry as a character. Valiant has a lot of strong female characters, and I feel that Kay McHenry will continue that tradition, and I look forward to seeing more of her in Bloodshot Reborn. Much like Ninjak, Bloodshot's one of my favorite characters. He was one of my favorite characters back in the 90s version of Valiant, so I'm glad to see him in the hands of such a great writer as Jeff Lemire, and I really look forward to seeing where Lemire is going to take him. As stated in the solicitation, when the series starts, Bloodshot is kind of withdrawn, and then through these gunmen that show up, he's kind of forced back into the violent world that he tried to leave behind. For Lemire, the draw to Bloodshot is, who is he? He's always been a man without a past, not quite sure where he's come from, but yet he's always followed around by the ghost of who he was. So while he may or may not learn more about who he was in the past, he probably can never fully embrace who that was, because he has no actual memory of it and very little emotion attached to what memories he does have. It creates a very interesting situation for a character to be in. One last thing that Lemire stated in the article is that here's a man that had no freedom. He was basically a killing machine, kind of a point-and-shoot weapon for Project Rising Spirit. He had no memory and no freedom. Well, if someone like that all of a sudden gained complete freedom and had those memories back, but without the emotion that was attached to those memories, what now? Almost his whole reason for being, since he's found this freedom from Project Rising Spirit, was to find out who he was. Well, once he accomplishes that, then what? Somehow he's got to come to grips with these memories of who he was before without the emotion attached to it, and yet reconcile that with all the guilt he feels for the things that he did in the name of Project Rising Spirit. So it's certainly kind of a more cerebral and emotional approach to Bloodshot. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of action to balance that out, and I look forward to where Lemire is going to take it. So I want to thank you all for joining me on this quick spotlight of the upcoming Valiant titles. Join me next time when I cover a couple of Marvel titles, the latest incarnation of the Hulk, and Miles Morales' Ultimate Spider-Man. I'll see you then.